and the problem is he didn't mention him as such previously or whatever. I don't remember there. There's some issues as far as the identification of that James or Jacob in Hebrew, Jacobus in Greek, in Josephus. But Ananus, as it turns out, has a brother. What's the brother's name? Jonathan. What happened to him? He was assassinated. At the moment in Josephus, where Josephus introduces us to the party of the extreme zealots called Sicarii. It's at that point that he tells us who the Sicarii are. I say, and you say, oh, well, you're always making excuses, Eisenman. Yeah, well, maybe, but I say that you ought to look at people by mutual enemies, who their enemies were. If people have the same enemies, they may be, in fact, on the same orientation or part of a network of different groups, more or less violent, with the same anti-establishment, revolutionary, if you like, orientation. And I think it works in this case. In my work on the Dead Sea Scrolls, I certainly identify Ananus ben Ananus as looking very much like the wicked priest. And I give a lot of arguments for allusions in the Dead Sea Scrolls that link up with Ananus's story, fate, activities. For instance, the scrolls talk about violating his corpse. It speaks about the violent ones of the Gentiles who seem to be in collusion with the scroll Essenes, if you want to call them that. And we know from Josephus that the Idumeans are led into the temple. These can be called violent ones of the Gentiles. They're very violent. In the middle of the uprising in 68 AD, and they go through the city and they kill all the high priests. Now, why are the Idumeans and the Zealots killing all the high priests? Please tell me, please give me an answer to that. Because they could look upon them as collaborators, as pro-Roman quislings, stoolies, whatever you want to call them. Totally illegitimate and totally hated. And the one they want most of all is, guess who? Ananus ben Ananus. And Josephus laments his fate in such terms that one is sure that he's not sincere. Because he says the same thing about Ananus ben Ananus as most texts say about James, that he was the protector of his countrymen, that the city fell because of his death, and so on. And most early church texts say that about James. So there's a lot of play back and forth in words. Very subtle. I mean, it's so sophisticated and so complicated that the average person who just comes at this from a lay point of view or a beginning point of view couldn't possibly hope to go through the maze, the minefield of these things. I mean, I've been looking at it for 30 years. I think I'm barely getting on top of it now. And most scholars look at it all their lives, and I don't think they ever get on top of it, a lot of them. So how's the average person going to do it? Well, that's the whole point. It's very difficult. I think that's why it's been so successful in terms of not being countered in any way. But now with the Dead Sea Scrolls, we really do have the native messianic material at our fingertips that can help us there. Now, these Sicarii or Zealots who assassinate Jonathan, I see a sequentiality there. The assassination of Jonathan, the trumped-up trial to destroy James, who's seen as responsible for the assassination of Jonathan, the Zealot Sicarii taking vengeance, as far as the Dead Sea Scrolls actually say, they took vengeance for the righteous teacher, what he did to the righteous teacher, this wicked priest. Sicarii, that's why you have to always read a lot of this in tandem with Josephus, which is why I gave you Josephus at the beginning of the class. Not that I love Josephus, as you know. They take vengeance for the destruction of James in this violent way. Why else would they be so violent? And they also throw his body First, they abuse it, as we said last time, and then they throw his body outside the walls as naked as food for jackals and dogs. You couldn't do a higher insult. What are they so upset about? That's what I ask. What are they so upset about? I can only think of the death of James. So I'm saying that people with similar enemies should be on similar sides. So they may not have exactly the same attitude towards violence. I mean, you can have Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. They're more or less on the same side, but one wants peaceful resistance, the other wants to push it further. Or the Black Panthers, if you prefer, you follow me? So, I mean, this is not surprising that people on the same order, but they're all anti the present situation. So, people on the same side often disagree as to means. So, whatever the picture here is, this doesn't prove anything. This doesn't prove the Jews were involved in the death of Christ one iota, which is what it's trying to point towards. His death, blood be upon us and upon our people. What? The Jews are responsible for priests that they didn't put in, that were forced on them by brutal dictators. Are we holding the people of Romania responsible for what Ceausescu did, who was put in power by the Russians? You follow me? Yet that's how the world has taken this forever, and that's how all Muslims then have taken the same propaganda. It permeates the Quran and so on. That's because slogans are much easier to deal with than the complexity of real history. It's so easy to get a slogan, and once you got the slogan, you're dead. You know, you can't fight that slogan. Because people live, die, they take their whole lives trying to find out about this, then they pass away, then new people come in, don't know anything about it, the slogan starts working all over again. I don't have an answer to that. You're university students and you want to learn. So that's the only thing I can tell you. So what is, and given the movie, The Passion, which is, you know, exaggerated from this like a tenfold or a hundredfold. What's the point of it, you see? What's it pointing at? So these are not legitimate representatives of the Jewish people. They are not popular. They are not put in. They're put in by the powerlessness of the Jewish people, not because of the Jewish people want these people. And when the Jews get a chance to kill them, they kill them all. So, I mean, you know, what's being said here as far as things like that go? Well, it would be very difficult to explain to the average person in a, you know, faith or a barroom situation. You would never be able to.